The thing about an adventure game is that we're going to need lots of places for the player to explore. At the moment, editing new areas in our game involves us basically working with a map like this, where ones are grass and 0 is dirt and 2 is water. We need an easier way to do this. The next few videos will focus on creating a map editor. In this video, we'll be creating this screen, which will allow us to create a new map and also load a map that we've already worked on. Let's get started. The starting code, as well as the completed code for this video, is in the description below. If you get stuck on anything, feel free to look at the completed code. Or you can also add a comment down below. First, let's add our stage for our editor. Let's go to Stages. We're actually going to create a folder for our editor. And inside of here, we'll come in and we'll say choose_file.py. Our editor is actually going to have two stages. One is the stage for picking the file that we want to do, and the second is for actually editing that file. For now, just do the following. Create a function, and we're just going to leave it blank. Next, let's go into main.py. Go ahead and import that function here, and then also go ahead and do the following. The way that our engine works is we have different stages of our game. So for example, this is the menu stage, and this is the play stage where you're actually playing the game. So we'll add, for now, another stage for choosing the file. Go ahead and jump into Stages and menu.py. We're going to create a function when we press the editor button that we're about to add. Feel free to copy one of these buttons. And right here, we're going to do the following. So instead, we're going to say editor button, and then we're also going to say editor. We'll do the same thing for this guy right here. We'll say editor size, and we'll get the editor button. Next, we're going to add on the editor button. We'll come in here. We'll actually add a button here, given the editor size. And finally, we're going to come in and place the editor here. It's actually going to take the place of the new game button. So notice that the Y position is to the bottom of the screen, minus 350. So going up 350 pixels. We're also going to take the new game button here, and we're going to do 500. That'll bump up the button. One more thing too, on this button where we're actually adding the button here, let's come in here and we'll say editor press. So yeah, we'll change that to say editor press here. Perfect, we'll test it. Jump into main.py and we'll run it. Now, if you started the game, you can hit the escape key and it'll bring you to the menu. Let's click editor, and there we go, perfect. So yeah, we have a stage and there's nothing here, which is awesome. Now we can put stuff here. If your game started on the gameplay, you might have this here in your main.py file. Go ahead and change this to say menu instead, and it will switch to starting at the main menu. You can obviously change this back to play if you don't want to see the main menu every time you load the game. But yeah, you can switch that to whatever you want. Let's come in here and we'll jump into choose file. We're going to add a simple back button to our code. Go up to the top and create a function for your back button. This is going to switch back to the main menu. And we could add a button here and set it up like we did previously. But I think one thing that we can do too as well is we can create a function for creating a simple button with a text field in it, because we probably will be making some more of these later. So let's go ahead and we're going to jump into components and we'll say button.py. Down at the very bottom of button.py, let's create the following function. This will make it substantially easier to just say, we want a button that has this text inside of it. This will allow us to create a button that just has a text label in it. In testing this, I noticed that there's this isMousePressed here in our button class. This repeatedly checks if the mouse button is pressed down and fires the event every single time. But we really want the button to only fire when we click the button. Let's come over here and we're going to change this to say isMouseJustPressed. We'll come over here and we'll paste it right here. And then we'll do number 1. For some reason, we have to do 1 here for this, and this is the left mouse button. But yeah, either which way, let's now jump into the choosefile.py. So stages, editor, and choose file. Up at the top, we're going to import buttons, and we're also going to import our simple label button here. We're going to use buttons later, but we're going to use this function right now. And now you can create a button just by doing the following. So passing in the function you want it to call, the font, the text, and then the location of where it's going to be placed. Let's go ahead and jump into main.py. Go ahead and run it. Let's click the editor button. These buttons we also should test too. Perfect. And we have a back button. And there we go. And it brings us back. The next thing that we need is a text input field where the user can actually type text into it. Let's go ahead and we're going to go into source, components, and UI. And we're going to do a new file called textinput.py. Start off by importing your label class. A text field is actually just going to be a label. Basically piggyback on all of the text rendering stuff that label already does. These are sort of the global fields that all text fields will have. Later, if you wanted to individually style each one of the text fields, you can. But I think for now, this is a good way to just keep everything consistent throughout our whole game. So each text field is going to have a background color of some sort. There's going to be a border color. In general practice, text fields generally have some kind of border around them. So for example, on this website, take a look at each one of these text fields. They generally have like a border around it to indicating that you can actually type there. So we'll set the border color to white and the background color to very, very dark gray. Padding will be the pixels around, and then the cursor width will be the blinking cursor. If you notice I'm typing right here, I mean in VS Code itself, there's a blinking cursor of where I'm going to type, and we'll have one as well. Our text input will actually take in quite a bit. It'll take in a font and text. The only thing that's actually required is the font, but all of these other things are optional fields that you can set. The width, for example, is the size left and right. Color is going to be the text color. Max text is going to be the maximum number of characters you can type in. Size will be the font size, so the height up and down of how big it is. And you can optionally do starting text, but we'll leave it blank for now. A text input is actually just a label. We're going to set up the label part of it. And essentially this means that we don't need to recode font rendering or anything like that. If the text field is currently pressed, we're going to set it to active. By default, it's going to be false. So going in again with this example on this website, if I click this text field, it's now active. If I click this one, the other one is no longer active, and this one is now active. The text field will keep track of the text. It'll keep track of the maximum text that you can put in there. We're going to import our engine class. We need to listen for when the user presses a key down and get that key and put it in this text input if it's active. In Pygame, there is a text input event that we can listen for that can actually make this a little easier. Let's take a break from this. We'll go ahead and jump into core and then input.py. Up at the top, we're going to keep track of all of the text input listeners. Anything that listens for text being typed on the keyboard. This is different from key presses. You're not just listening for a single key on the keyboard. You're basically listening for any key and what was typed inside of it. Now let's go to core and then we'll go to engine.py. Scroll down to your run function and find where we're looping through each one of the events. So right now we're listening for the quit event, which is the closing the window, for key down, which is if a certain key is pressed, key up, mouse down, and mouse up. We're going to add one more. At the very end of it, go ahead and add one more. We're going to add a text input event. Make sure that it lines up with the other elifs. We're going to get each one of our text input listeners, anything that listens for input. We're going to loop through each one of them, and then we're going to call a function called text input. So we're going to let them know that G was typed on the keyboard. We now have everything we need. Let's jump into textinput.py and we'll keep going with this. So again, that is in source, components, UI, and text input. We're also going to import the text input listeners. We're going to add ourselves to as a text input listener. Similarly, we're going to add ourselves to the active objects, and that'll say that we have both an update function and Because of that, let's add two methods to our text input class. So because of that, we have this update function, and then we also have a text input function. This is called whenever somebody types on the keyboard, it'll basically say, hey, G was pressed, or R, or whatever, and that'll be passed in as the text. We're going to set the width, the size of the text input field to whatever it is. We're going to declare a variable called blink step, which determines whether the cursor is being rendered. So again, for example, in VS Code, take a look. There's a cursor right after false here that's currently blinking. We're basically going to encode that same thing in our game. The area which you can click on the text fields will be the following. So it'll be whatever our width is, and then with padding on both sides, up and down. That's why you multiply it by 2. And then same thing, up and down, and then padding on the top and bottom. That's why you multiply it by 2. Next, we're going to create that blinking cursor that we have, which you see in VS Code. And we're going to fill the cursor with the current text color that we're typing. So if you type in green, it's actually going to make it green. We also need the background of the text input field. Again, looking at our example here, the background is this actual like the darker kind of color here, and then the border around it. First, we're actually going to fill it with the border color, and then we're going to draw a little rectangle inside of that. I'll make this a little bit smaller. So yeah, what we're going to do is we'll come in and we'll draw on the background. We're going to draw the background color, and then we're going to draw a rectangle. This rectangle is going to have 1 and 1. So the border is basically going to be 1 pixel wide. And because of that, we're going to do -2 and -2 to make a border on the bottom and the right as well. That was quite a bit of code for the constructor, but that's actually it for the constructor. So let's now jump into the update function here. So we'll get rid of pass. Ignore the update function. We're going to come back to that. Let's do our text input first. So if we're not currently active, then we're just going to return. We're just not going to do anything. We're not going to do the rest of the function. We're going to add whatever text came in. So let's say that the user pressed a G. We're going to put G at the end of the text. We need to verify that we're not above the maximum amount of characters. So we're going to get the number of characters by doing len self text and check to make sure that it's not bigger than max text. And if it is, we're going to slice the text, and we're only going to get up to the maximum number of characters. Think about a slice of pizza. You're basically saying, I can only eat up to 4 slices of pizza. So essentially, you're only going to get 3 slices. So you're saying, well, I only want this much text. When you slice something, you put the beginning of it in front of it, and then you put the end after it. The colon is separated here. If you don't have anything, it actually goes to the very beginning of the text. And likewise, if you don't have anything here, it goes from whatever you specified to the very end of the whole text. For example, this would start on the index of 20 and go all the way to the end of the string. And likewise, this would start from the very beginning, the first character, and go all the way to 20. This is what we're actually doing here. Let's say that we could only do 20 characters. It will go from the beginning all the way to 20. Last but not least, we're going to call our setText function. This actually renders it. We've already written this in our label class, so we can just call it again and move on from there. If we need to break down this, we'll come in here and we'll remove ourselves from the text input listeners. We're also going to remove ourselves from being updated. So this is great because it can add characters, but the huge issue is it can't backspace on them. This doesn't actually get the backspace character, so we're going to need to handle that. We're going to end up needing our input, so is mouse pressed and is key just pressed. We're also going to import our engine as well. Let's get the current position of the mouse, and all we have to do is check for backspace, like so. So if we say if key is just pressed, and as long as we're active, as long as the user is currently editing this text field, we're just going to self-set text. This -1 says the very end, the very last character. Basically what we're doing is we're slicing the text, and we're slicing off the last character. Calling setText will just re-render the text too, so it'll just change everything. So what this does, every single second, it's going to update the cursor. You could obviously increase these. You could say 60 and 30 to go faster if you wanted to. but I think once a second is probably good for our purposes. If you want the cursor on all the time, you could just set this to true as well in the constructor, and you're good to go. Similar to our button class, we're going to get the click area. So if the mouse was pressed down, we're going to check and see if the mouse is inside of the text field. If it is, we're going to set ourselves to active. And if it's not, we're going to set ourselves to not active. We're going to say false. Last thing we need is a draw function. We need to draw our cursor and also the background as well. Let's come over here and let's do at the very end a draw function. We want that behind everything, so we're going to draw the background first. Next, we want to draw the text, and this is a label, so we can just call super.draw and it'll draw the text for us. Next, if we're currently on the blink step and if we are active, we're going to draw the cursor surface and we're going to draw it at this location. So we're going to go to the very right of the text. This is why we're doing this get width plus the padding and then plus where the actual text input field is. For Y, we're just going to get the location of the text. And this is actually it. This is the text input field in a nutshell. We're going to use our editor to test this. So let's go ahead and we're going to scroll down to our choosefile.py. So that's in stages, editor, and choose file. Up at the top, let's go ahead and import our text input field. Let's actually keep track of the new map input. We'll also start placing our elements. So let's go ahead and we'll set the page width to 500. We're going to center everything inside the screen as you saw earlier. So we'll say 500 pixels and then we'll do some math to kind of center everything. Up at the very top of this function, we'll come in here and we'll import our new map input as a global. Then let's scroll down and we're going to get the starting position of where we're supposed to be at. So let's say that this is the screen. We want the width of this little view thing to be 500 pixels. And we want this thing to be in the center of the screen. So to do that, we're going to go to the halfway point of the screen. By doing this right here, we're going to basically get halfway of the camera width. And then we're going to go back by half of this page, essentially. And now that we've calculated this value, we can use it for pretty much all of the rest of our elements. We're going to come in here, we'll do the following. So we'll create an entity for all of this. And the only component that's going to be in here is this text input. It takes a font that you want to use. Again, these fonts are in content fonts, and then I have a bunch of fonts here. But if you have a different font, you can use that. I believe we covered fonts. I think it was video 10 of this series. The link is in the description below for the playlist. We'll come in here and we'll just start out with test just to see if it works. And we'll also set the width to 400. We're going to put a button right after this text input. So we'll do 400 and then maybe the other 100 pixels will be the add button. We'll set our X position to the page X as we calculated earlier. And the Y position will be 100. We're also going to get the text input. We don't want the entity. One other thing I forgot to do is let's go up to the very top and we're going to import our entity class so that we can actually create entities in this file. This is the big moment of truth. We wrote a lot of code, so let's test it. Let's jump into main.py and we'll run it. Okay, we have this screen. Let's go to the editor. And there we go. We have a text input. Let's click it. And there we go. It starts the cursor. Let's start typing in here. Let's backspace. So do all of these tests. Make sure that it's good. And also try to fill everything. So yeah, it's limited to 20 characters as well and won't let you go anything past 20 characters. Congratulations, you now have a text input field that you can put wherever you want in your game. Whenever you need to get some kind of text from the user of some sort, you can use this thing. And let's go ahead and hit the back button. Yeah, perfect, it gets rid of it too. I'll hit the quit game and there we go. That's one of the UI elements down for this video that we need. Next, we need to create our scroll view, which will allow us to show all of the maps that we currently have. Let's go ahead and we'll go to source components and we'll go to UI. We'll create a new file called scroll_view.py. Go ahead and import Pygame and also we'll do the following. The padding is the number of pixels on each one of the sides. The border color is similar to the one that we did previously. The background color is also this as well. The sensitivity is how many pixels you go up or down every single time that you use the scroll wheel. So when you do one scroll with the scroll wheel, it'll go up 16 pixels, for example. To create our scroll view, we'll have the following. The items will be a list of some sort of items. On create is going to be a function that creates something given an item. And then on choose is going to be when the user actually clicks on something on the scroll view. The item size is going to be the size in pixels up and down for each item displayed on it. We'll go ahead and we'll keep track of the following. We're going to keep a list of all of the entities inside of the scroll view. We'll keep track of where we are inside of the scroll view. 0 will be up at the top. This Y will actually change with moving down and moving up. I forgot to, we'll also keep track of the item size as well. The click area is similar to the text input that we did earlier. Same thing with the background too. We're going to do a background. We're going to fill it with the border color first. And then we'll come in here and we'll draw a rectangle inside of it. So we're going to draw basically our border color around the whole thing. And then we're going to draw a slightly smaller rectangle for the background color. Now this right here is where everything is going to be drawn. We're actually going to draw all of our stuff into the surface. Then we're going to draw that surface on the screen. Just to show you what I mean with this, with the final product, take a look at this. As you scroll, everything stays inside of this view. So it's actually drawing on a surface that's as big as the rectangle and everything's there. Notice that like as I go here, 48 is only being drawn into this rectangle. This entire rectangle is a surface and basically everything is being drawn into this surface. We'll also add ourselves to the active objects as well as the UI drawables so that we can draw. In our setup function, we're actually going to take all of the objects that we have inside and we're going to reassign us as the one that's going to draw them. So normally the engine would basically be responsible for calling the draw function, but instead we're going to call it so that we can draw it on this surface. I'll show you what I mean here in a second. We're going to create an entity for every single thing inside. We accomplish this by calling this onCreate function. We're going to pass in the item, and we're also going to pass in a reference to the scroll view. To determine where that entity is, we just take which one it is times the item size. So let's say that this is our scroll view, and this is a scroll view item. This is another one. This is another one. This one's 0. This one's 1, and this one's 2. This is 50 pixels. This is 50 pixels. This is 50 pixels. So 50 times 0 equals 0. 50 times 1 equals 50. 50 times 2 equals 100. So by multiplying the number of pixels here by which one that we're on, we can basically determine where this is in the scroll view. We're going to basically steal every one of these from the engine's drawables to our drawables. For each component inside of the entity that we created, we're just going to check if this thing is being drawn by the engine. If it is, we're going to steal it from the engine and we're going to add it to our drawables. That way we're in control of and responsible for drawing that thing because we want to draw it on our surface instead of the engine's surface. In some other game engines, you might have child and parent objects and things like that. But for now, this will be good enough. Finally, we'll add basically that entity to all of our child entities. Next, we're going to make stubs for our update function as well as our draw function. The scroll view is going to listen for if a mouse is clicked anywhere in the scroll view. And then if it is, it's going to click on that particular item. That way, every item is not checking for the mouse at just the scroll view itself. A little bit more optimized. Not like it really matters, but anyway, let's come in here. We'll get the mouse position. We'll similarly get the position relative to where the mouse is. Similar to how we did with the button as well as the scroll view, we'll check to see if we're within the click area. I almost feel like we could make a function for this later. We'll come in here and we'll handle the mouse click. We need to determine where the mouse exactly is. So we're going to do it with the following. we need to check and see where the mouse actually is. And we can do this by sort of doing the opposite of what we did earlier by dividing it by the item size and then basically getting the integer of that relative to where the mouse is. This one right here is for determining where it is relative to the entire window itself. And then this will be for scrolling up and down. So, right, so for example, we have stuff up here. This one right here is now actually the fourth one. Even though, we scrolled up a little bit, we can't see 1 and 2 anymore, but now we're on 3 and 4. So we need to compensate with that with this guy right here. We're going to check and see too if we're actually within range. If you have 5 items and there's a bunch of blank space at the end and the mouse is clicking on that, we're just going to ignore it. We're going to then call the onChoose function. So whatever it is, we're basically, when you create a scroll view, you say, okay, when somebody clicks on an item, how do you want me to handle that? So we're going to call that function that we took in, passing in the specific item that was clicked on. We'll handle the scrolling here in a second. Let's go ahead and go to the draw function. For the draw function, we're actually going to have our own surface that I kind of explained earlier. We're going to draw everything inside of our own surface. We're going to loop through our own drawables and we're going to draw them on our surface. And finally, we're going to draw everything onto the screen. So we're going to draw our surface onto the screen. So everything gets collected into our surface, and we take that surface and we draw it onto the screen. Come up here to the top and we're going to say screen. I forgot to put this up here. One more thing with the scroll view. We can have default values for this onCreate and onChoose, or you can specify what you want to do. But let's code those. This actually creates each item. So basically, when you want to populate the scroll view, you're going to call this function for every single item. It's going to create a text label for each item, assuming that each item, for example, is like a string or something. We're also going to do a custom onChoose function that all it's going to do is print. And this will help us debug and ensure that this scroll view is working correctly. Now that we've done this, let's go to source and we'll go to stages and we'll go to choose file. Up at the top, we're going to import the following. We're going to import our scroll view class as well as the create scroll label generic and the onChoose generic function that we have as well. Let's go ahead and we'll scroll down to this editor choose file and we'll go to the very end. And let's come in here and create a scroll view. So what we're going to do is we'll just populate it with a couple different values that we can test this with. We're creating a label for each one of these, like ham and eggs and cheese, etc. And then when we click any one of those, it's just going to print it to the console. It's going to be 32 pixels wide for each choice. The entire scroll view will have a width of 500 and then a height of 500 as well. And then these are the locations of where it is. Page X is the same X location as this one. So the lineup all good. Let's jump into main.py and we'll run it. Let's test it. Okay, let's go to the editor. And there we go. And we have a scroll view. An important test to do here is to actually click one of these items. And it should say ham down here at the bottom, or cheese, or bread, etc. Click below and just make sure that it doesn't crash or anything. There we go. We actually have a lot of the functionality of the scroll view done. We just need to do the scrolling part. So I'll go ahead and close this. The next thing that we need to do is we need to handle our scroll. And what we can do is let's extend our input.py to keep track of the current scroll amount. Let's go to input.py. We'll come up here and we'll declare a variable called scroll delta, which will keep track of how much the scroll changed. Let's go down to the bottom here and we're going to add another function. This function will add to the scroll delta. So taking in a certain amount. And then if you want, you can use this for debugging purposes. If you can leave it if you want. I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of it. Let's similarly do the reset scroll function. So this will just set the scroll delta back to 0. Let's now go into engine.py. So in engine, find the run method. Inside of where you're handling the events here, we'll go down and we will add another event here. Let's handle the mouse wheel event. We'll import the add scroll delta function that we just created. And all we have to do is do the event.y. There is event.x. It is possible to scroll horizontally, But for now, we're just going to scroll vertically. Now, go up to the top. I'll make this a little bit smaller. Find where we're importing from core input right as we do the beginning of the run function. I'm going to do comma, and then I'm going to do a backslash like so. And we're also going to import the reset scroll function right at the beginning of the while loop here. So everyone, we're just going to call reset scroll. And that'll just set the scroll back to 0. Very similar to what we're doing with these, with clearing the mouse buttons and keys that have just been pressed down. We're also going to reset the scroll back to 0. And now our game supports scrolling. Let's go into the scroll view. So again, this is in source, components, and scroll view.py. We could scroll up a little bit, and maybe we'll put this near the beginning of the update function. So we'll come in here and we'll handle the scrolling like so. Next, we need to actually set the position of all the things inside of the scroll view. We're going to loop through each entity. We're going to use enumerate because we need to know which one it is. This is similar to how we did it earlier. So 0 is the one at the top, and then 1 is 50, 2 is 100, 3 is 150, etc. So yeah, we'll set the new Y position as such. So depending on which one it is, it'll do that, and then minus however much you scrolled. Let's go into main.py and we'll run it and let's test it. Okay, we'll go to editor and we'll scroll, and there we go. But the problem is you can scroll forever. There's no limits, right? You can scroll up and forever and ever, and it just, yeah, it took a second to load. So let's come in here and let's clamp it. Clamping means that you're limiting it by a minimum and a maximum. So we'll jump into scroll view. The minimum is easy, it's just 0, but the maximum we actually need to calculate based on the number of items that we have. Let's actually create a whole new method. So right in front of the update function, we'll create a nice easy method called getScrollMax that we can call. And essentially what we want is we want to basically determine how many items we have times the size of each item, and then subtract that from the click area's height. And then I just did half of it, just kind of in testing. It is possible that this is less than 0 because the click area height might be, you might not have enough items in there. So we're just going to return 0 as the maximum if that's the case. This will actually mean that if all of the items generally fit on the entire scroll view, then there won't be any scrolling at all. Let's go ahead and we'll scroll down here. And find where you're handling the scrolling that we did earlier. So it's right after this, we did this self inner y minus equals and then all that. To clamp the position, we're going to get the maximum. And essentially, we're going to check and see, is the inner y less than 0? And if it is, we'll just set it to 0. And then if the inner y is greater than the maximum, we're going to set it equal to the maximum. That basically will clamp it. Now jump into main.py and let's go ahead and run it. We'll go to editor, and we shouldn't be able to scroll anymore. But that is because we don't have enough items in there to test this. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. Let's jump into, we'll go into stages, editor, and then choose file. And right here, what we can do is we can just, I'm just going to comma, space, paste. Comma, space, paste. Comma, space, paste. Just make sure that there's commas in front of everything. Let's see if that's enough. Let's go to main.py and we'll run it. Editor. Yeah, that's enough. And you should be able to scroll for a little bit. Yeah. And the 0.5 that we wrote earlier, it'll sort of stop it at the halfway point, which I actually think is good because it kind of indicates to the user that this is the end. And then, yeah, you can't scroll anything higher than that. You can obviously play around with this, but we now have the building blocks basically to code the screen. So let's go ahead and we'll finish up with this. So again, this screen needs to do two things. It needs to create a new file, taking in what the user typed in, and it also needs to be able to load map files that we've already done. Let's go ahead and we're going to jump into Stages, Editor, and choose File. Let's scroll up to the way top. Let's define a function called createMap and set it, we'll get to it later. We're also going to define a function called loadMap, and we'll get to it later. We're also going to define a function called getMaps, which will basically get all of our map files and put them in that scroll view. Let's do this one first. When working with files, you can import the OS module in Python, And we can simply get every single one of the files in our map folder that we have. Let's go ahead and we'll just return all the files. Next, let's go ahead and switch our scroll view to actually use this function. Let's scroll down and find where we're doing this. So find the square brackets on this first argument here. We're going to replace it with get maps instead. Doesn't take anything. All it's going to do is just get all the map files. Let's test this. Let's go to main.py and we'll run it. And then jump into the editor, and there we go. And we have our map files. One thing you might notice is that these map files are not necessarily in alphabetical order. Let's fix that. Go ahead and jump into Stages, Editor, and choose File. Let's go ahead and scroll up to the top. And all we have to do with this get maps function is we just sort them. So we'll say files.sort. There we go. It should be in alphabetical order. Let's go ahead and test it. We'll jump into main.py and we'll run it. We'll jump into editor, and there we go. It's alphabetically organized. I think this will be really important when we have potentially a lot of these later on for it to be alphabetical. It'll be a lot easier to find. We'll go ahead and close that, and let's go ahead and Stages, Editor, and choose File.py. Let's go up a little bit higher to our load map function, and we'll replace pass with just simply a print statement for now. We can do this in the next video, actually loading the map. But we do want to know that the correct map was selected. Go ahead and scroll down to the bottom, and let's scroll to our scroll view. See where it says print on choose? When you click on something in the scroll view, it just prints it to the console. So now what we're going to do is we're going to call our load map function instead. Don't put any parentheses after it. We're just going to say, hey, when you're ready, call this function when somebody clicks on it. We'll go ahead and jump into main.py and let's run it. Go into editor, and we'll click on forest map. And we'll close this. You might have a bunch of output like this because previously we were printing something. If that's the case, let's go ahead and go into the little search thing up here, and we'll type the word print. And you can actually see everywhere that you're printing in your entire file. It's actually in our scrollview.py. So right here, if you had this on in the scrollview.py, so this is in the update function of scrollview.py, go ahead and remove it for now. And let's come in here and we'll jump into main.py and let's run it again. Okay, we'll go to editor and then go ahead and click on volcano map. And taking a look at the terminal down in here, we actually have loading volcano map. Perfect. Last thing we need to do is we need to do the create file. And we should probably put a background on this too. Let's go ahead and we'll jump into Stages, Editor, and choose File. Scroll up to the top and let's go to our create map function. The create map function is going to get the text from the new map input field. This input field is up here at the top and it gets set down here. Go after your new map input. We'll come in here and we'll do a new button right after it for our create. We'll move it over a couple pixels to the right. Let's jump over here to main and we'll run it. Go into editor. Yeah, and we have a new create button. Press this create button, we'll close it, and there we go. It's creating a map called test. Now, we want all of our files to have a .map extension at the end of it. So let's add that. Let's go into Stages, Editor, choose File. Scroll up to the way top. We're going to check and see if the length of the text is less than 4, or if the text does not have .map at the end of it. We're going to give ourselves a tiny little bit of room, but we are switching in the next video. We are switching as soon as we click this, so this is okay. And this will give us enough room to just put .map at the end of it when we call that. Let's go ahead and test this. Let's jump into main.py and we'll run it. 2 tests that we need to do. Let's jump into editor. Let's go to test.map and hit the create, and it shouldn't put anything there. Now let's go ahead and we'll do test, hit create again, and there we go. It actually adds .map to it. If you have, for example, like .m, hit create, it'll put, check out what it did, right? It'll add another one here. Perfect. Let's go ahead and close this. I want to add some labels to help the user. Let's go to Stages, Editor, and we'll do choose file.py. Let's go ahead and we'll scroll down a little bit. Right before we do this new map input here, let's go ahead and we'll add the following. We're going to add a label that says create new map at the top. It'll just have a Y of 20, so it'll be way up at the top. We need to import this label class. Let's go ahead up at the top and we'll import the label class. Let's scroll back down. It doesn't matter exactly where these are, but let's go right after the create simple label button. That way the code is kind of placed where everything is. And we'll also add another label for loading the map as well. Let's go into main.py and we'll run it. Okay, we'll go to editor. And there we go. We have this nice label, create new map, and then this nice label, load map down there. Kind of indicates to the user what's going on. Now, one last thing, let's add a background to this. Obviously, the screen is a little boring, and this is a game, so let's go ahead and we'll add a background. I added this background. You can actually find this in the description below. We'll go down into, again, Stages, Editor, Choose File. And we'll go up at the top right where we've got this definition for the Editor, Choose File. We'll come up here and we'll do the following. We're going to add a background. We need to import the sprite class, so let's go up to the way top. There we go. Okay, so let's test it. We'll jump into main.py and we'll run it. Okay, we'll go to editor. There we go. We have a nice screen where we can either create a new map or we can choose a new map file. I think that this is a very good stopping point. We have a good sort of framework for moving into the editor for the next video. Thank you so much for watching. If you run into any issues as you're doing this, again, the code, the starting code and the complete code is in the description below. And it also, too, feel free to leave a comment as well if you run into any issues or anything, or if there's any bugs with this. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll see you in the next video.